Oklahoma is the land of second chances. Who were the people that made it so? We'll dig for the golden threads they've woven through Oklahoma history. The Red River Institute is proud to present Oklahoma Gold. I'm Gwin Faulconer-Lippert, along with award-winning author and Southern Nazarene University historian John J. Dwyer. We'll find the golden nuggets of Oklahoma history here now. Oklahoma Gold. He was one of America's greatest at playing America's favorite pastime, and a big hit in Oklahoma. John J. Dwyer, tell me his story.
Well, Gwin, if you were an Oklahoma boy, definitively, in the 1950s or 1960s, you knew that America's most popular sport was baseball, and you probably rooted for either the St. Louis Cardinals or the New York Yankees. The Cards because they were the closest team to us geographically, by far. The Yanks because of Spabinaw native and Commerce-reared Mickey Mantle. Yeah, that's the same Mickey Mantle whose massive bronze and granite statue graces the Chickasaw Bricktown Ballpark near downtown Oklahoma City. Legions of books have lionized and sometimes exposed the Mick. Charlie Daniels and others have written songs celebrating him. Simon and Garfunkel intended to use him in their legendary song Mrs. Robinson, but they had to settle for Joe DiMaggio to fit the beat. And filmmakers from Clint Eastwood to Oliver Stone have revered him on the silver screen. In fact, the scuffed, chipped bobblehead of Mickey Mantle that my mom bought me when I was 8 years old and Mickey was leading the Yankees to yet another World Series still stands faithfully on the bookshelf next to my desk. In fact, his deeds shine through the lengthening years all the more because of the physical obstacles that he overcame.
Obstacles?
Many obstacles, and it just hurts to go through this list. For instance, a high school football injury in Oklahoma nearly cost him his leg and tormented him his entire two-decade professional baseball career. And then a terrible knee injury and a drainage spot in Yankee Stadium his rookie year in the majors multiplied the challenge and necessitated a half dozen surgeries just for that. Indeed, perhaps the most remarkable feat of all that Mantle accomplished was the courage through which he did it, amidst nearly constant pain and nearly crippling injuries. Sometimes his teammates said he looked like a mummy before he put on his uniform. He was taped from head to toe. Worse still, though, were the pain of his beloved father's early passing from this life, Mickey's expectation of a young death due to the genetics that took numerous male Mantle kinfolk early, and the pressures of the world's largest stage on a soft-spoken Oklahoma country boy. They all contributed to an even greater affliction, and this is one that it's sad to have to talk about, but if we're telling the story, it's part of it. And that was a savage alcoholism that cost Mickey Mantle his wife, his family, yet more athletic laurels, and ultimately his life. Back at the start, though, he possessed the greatest combination of speed, power, and athletic prowess that baseball had ever seen when he came to the Yankees as a 19-year-old pup in 1951. He ran the fastest recorded time from home plate to first base, that's 90 feet, in the history of the game, 3.1 seconds from a standstill, and that's yet to be beaten, and it was run over 60 years ago. His speed when running the bases hard in order to beat a throw from the outfield in old game films, and you can watch these on YouTube, is blinding. It's no wonder that Coach Bud Wilkinson recruited him to play halfback for his own record-setting Oklahoma Sooners football team. So how did all that translate on the field against the greatest athletes of his generation? Well, he's one of only 9 Major League Baseball players in the past century to win a Triple Crown for hitting the most home runs, most runs batted in, and highest batting average the same season. He's one of only 3 Triple Crown winners ever to win a Gold Glove for being the best defensive player at his position. So best offense, best defense at the same time on the highest level of America's most popular sport during his generation. In addition to all of this, easily overlooked is that he was one of the game's best at both bunting and drawing walks. Complete player if ever was one. He won the American League Most Valuable Player Award 3 times. He was the greatest switch hitter, that means being able to bat from right-handed or left-handed, baseball has ever known. And he's also the only one ever to win the Triple Crown. That is the only switch hitter ever to win the Triple Crown. Mickey Mantle literally knocked the ball out of the park in more than one city, including his 565-foot blast at Washington in 1953. That's often credited as the longest measured home run in baseball history. He hit 536 home runs total in his career, which was the third most ever when he retired. Yet, Gwin, it's in the scroll of World Series history, best on best, where Mickey Mantle separates himself from all others. Here, he perhaps provides a glimpse into why he, and not others, retains so visceral a hold on the hearts of so many who witnessed his deeds, either in person, on TV, on the radio. He was one of the greatest clutch performers ever in any sport. He still holds 7 major individual World Series records. Again, that is the peak performance in the finals, like the Super Bowl of baseball, the NBA Finals of baseball. His 7 major records he still holds over all players include most runs scored, most runs batted in, most extra base hits, most total bases, most walks, and most home runs, 18. He led his Yankees to 12 World Series and 7 World Championships. Even in the twilight of his career, on that greatest stage in sports, well into his 30s, he went out slugging. The last World Series in which he ever played, in 1964 against St. Louis, was tied 1 game apiece, and the third game was knotted 1-1 going into the bottom of the 9th inning. Mantle felt guilty for aiding the Cardinals' 1 run that they had with an error of his own. Star pitcher Jim Bouton heard him mumble softly in the dugout before he went up to the plate, "I'm going to hit it out." Well, Tim McCarver, the future Hall of Fame catcher that any St. Louis Cardinal fan knows, knew that Mantle, who had so much tape on him in that game that he looked like a mummy without his uniform, McCarver knew he was hurting. He was a shell of the guy that he once was, McCarver remembered. I could even hear him groaning on some swings. Well, Mantle proceeded to park the first pitch he got into the upper right field bleachers to win the game with his legendary walk-off homer, and you can find that easy on YouTube.
How would I ever keep up with all those records that you just said?
Well, maybe go to our website where we have it broken out a little more completely in our blog on Mickey Mantle.
JohnJDwyer.com. Wow, that's pure Oklahoma gold. So, stitching the past to the present. You can see that bronze statue at Chickasaw Bricktown Ballpark in the heart of Oklahoma City. But what in the world is going to be the Golden Nugget?
I guess you'll have to hang around and find out.
This is Oklahoma Gold. Dignifying our history by telling their stories. And we're talking about America's favorite pastime with Oklahoma's favorite player. Here are the clues. Let's see if you can guess what the Golden Nugget will be. He was from Spavinaw and Commerce, Oklahoma. He has a bronze statue at Bricktown Ballpark, but he has more World Series records than anybody. What is the Golden Nugget of this Oklahoma Gold, John J. Dwyer?
Well, it's going to be a little bit of a surprise, Gwin, and you mentioned the World Series. I wanted to share one other great feat that Mickey Mantle accomplished in the last World Series game he ever played in. Dramatic 7th and final game of an epic duel between the St. Louis Cardinals and New York Yankees, 2 of the greatest teams of the era. The Yankees were behind 6-0 late in the game, and he was facing probably the greatest pitcher in the game at that point, Bob Gibson of St. Louis, who had just been wreaking havoc with the Yankees the whole series. Mickey steps to the plate and smashes a 3-run homer, the ultimate clutch play against World Series MVP and Hall of Fame pitcher Bob Gibson late in that game. That blast launched a rally which nearly won the game in the series for New York. Though the Cardinals outlasted his Yankees in a 7-5 thriller, he hit Mantle personally 300 for the series and led all other players in most other major hitting categories for the whole series, including RBIs. But, Mickey Mantle, and this is kind of leading into our Golden Nugget, he had qualities of the heart that few others possess, aside from his great athletic skills and leadership. After growing up in a poor Oklahoma family during the Dust Bowl and Great Depression, his connection with children during the many years of his superstardom was legendary. He loved them and they loved him, and it showed. One of his famous statements regarding children was, he said this, "A team is where a boy can prove his courage on his own. A gang is where a coward goes to hide." Mickey Mantle. Well, sometimes he was in pain, his all-star New York Yankees shortstop and teammate Tony Kubek remembered. Talk about pain. He goes, "I used to say to him, for gosh sake, please, Mick, don't play this game. Let that thing heal." But he'd say, and look, there'd be nobody around. This was Tony Kubek talking. Mickey wasn't making a grand gesture. He'd say, "Tony, maybe there's a guy out there with his kid, and it might be the only ticket he can afford all season. He gets off work that one day, and he brings his kid to see me, so I better be out there." And I wanted to mention one other thing before we go into our home stretch of the Nugget. Most of the era in which Mickey Mantle played pro baseball, Jim Crow segregation still held sway in much of America. His teammates recall more than one time when Mickey stepped up for black teammate Elston Howard, the Yankees catcher, and other black players. Howard himself recalled the time a restaurant would not serve him because he was African American. A disgusted Mickey Mantle took 2 heaping plates of food and went out to eat on a cold bus in the parking lot with Elston Howard. Well, sadly, as we kind of alluded to earlier, his post-baseball life was a long, sad descent into alcoholic brokenness and loss. He wrote, though, in a famous 1994 Sports Illustrated memoir about how it got to where he was worrying all the time about mistakes he'd made and so forth. It was a great article, and it's in the vault online. You can read it. But in the end, he staged the greatest of his many ninth-inning rallies. He overcame his alcoholism and declared in that same article, "I'd rather put a gun to my head than have another drink." He did neither. Always a humble and self-effacing man when sober, he trusted in Christ in the final weeks of his life in Baylor Hospital in Dallas, which was the hospital I was actually born in. That's where he died. According to devout Christian and Yankee teammate Bobby Richardson and others, the Commerce Comet's last days were among his happiest. I'm sure many of you listening right now knew Mickey's fellow Oklahoman and Yankee teammate and star pitcher Tommy Sturdivant. He was a fellow churchman of mine in years past, and he once related to me the essence of Mickey Mantle as he saw it. And Gwin, if you want a shining nugget on Oklahoma gold, here it is. One time, this is Tom Sturdivant closing us out. One time after I'd retired, I called Mick, who was still playing in New York. He was still probably the most famous player in baseball. I asked him to come speak for our Southside Oklahoma City Boy Scouts banquet. It was a poverty-ridden area. He chewed me out and asked how I expected him to come back to Oklahoma for such a thing with his demanding schedule. Then he hung up on me. A few weeks later, he called me and chewed me out some more for asking him to do something for some boys that he couldn't do. Then he asked me when and where, but he hung up on me again. I didn't hear anything more from him until the day of the scout banquet. An hour before it started, I got another call from him. "Where the blankety blank did you say that scout deal is, Sturdivant?" After I told him, he growled, "Well, all right then. I'm on my way from the airport. I'll be there right before it starts." Tommy Sturdivant said that was Mickey Mantle. There was no one else like him, and I've never heard of anyone like him since.
Mickey Mantle is pure Oklahoma